Let's get ready to rumble!
Oh my God! Unbelievable! Down goes Frazier! Down goes
It's time! You're listening to New Mexico's only mixed martial arts and boxing podcast, The Low Blow, on AdamCombatSports.com and Fight Fans Radio. It is episode 130 of The Low Blow on SouthwestFight.com, USCombatSports.com, and Fight Fans Radio. I am Justin Goodrum, joined by Jorge Hernandez on this Valentine's Day. What's up, man?
Happy Valentine's. I love you.
I like you as a friend. Is that
Damn it, man. Hey, shot in the dark. You want to do something tonight?
Oh, man. LeBron James and Kevin Durant are my days tonight.
Oh, right. Go ahead, man. I don't blame you, man.
But anyway, let's get just the housekeeping things out of the way. We're available through email, through lowblow505@gmail.com. Also through our Twitter, through @thelowblow. That has interesting stories that we see online. Also stories featuring the latest news in New Mexico combat sports. Also, we're available on iTunes and the Stitcher mobile app. Just download Stitcher via your app store on your iPhone or smartphone device. Type in The Low Blow and we're on there. Trying to think what else. YouTube, youtube.com/lowblow505 that has all our video interviews. That'll have the latest coverage concerning the Bellator card. That's going to have the weigh-in, post-fight interviews. Really stay tuned for that for all the latest news concerning the Bellator card. Also through Fight Fans Radio. This show is taped, so we're not live this week, but you can catch Fight Fans Radio through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or Ustream, all using the Fight Fans Radio hashtag. So today, a lot to get to. Since we're not live, we're taping this, we get to talk about a lot of issues that have been happening in the last couple of weeks. But also, we're going to update the latest news concerning the Rio Rancho Bellator card. We're going to give you all the latest news concerning national boxing and MMA. And we're going to preview the Adrian Broner fight on HBO and preview the UFC on Field TV. A lot of people are saying that might be one of the best cards of the year, even though it's on a network that not many people have. So we're going to preview that. And we're going to talk about, all the craziness going on with wrestling in the Olympics, boxing in the Olympics, and Vitor Belfort's TRT exemption. So, man, let's get into it, and let's start off with the Bellator card coming up February 28th. That's on a Thursday, starting at, I think the local fights will start at 6 Mountain Time, with the main card starting at 8 Mountain Time. You have some news that you broke on SouthwestFight.com about Holly Holm's a new opponent and some changes to the undercard.
Yeah, I mean, Holly Holm finally has an opponent. After a week of scavenging, they actually have a fighter by the name of Katie Merrill. Katie is not someone I'm too familiar with, and I don't think a lot of people are either. She's based out of Brighton, Massachusetts. She actually fights out of a gym called Y Crew MMA. Not much is actually known about her, but, thankfully, if Holly has an opponent, we knew it wouldn't be someone of, high stature just because they were scrambling at the last second, and in steps this Merrill to actually replace her. Other notable changes to that undercard, we had Angelo Sanchez, who was probably the most decorated of the local fighters on there, former King of the Cage champion. He is out due to an injury. We also had, to replace him to fight against Kevin Croom, the promoters and the fight, the guys doing the matchups, actually reached out to Rand Weathers, who's a fighter that trains out of the Jackson's gym and Mean One MMA here in the Albuquerque area. He, for whatever reason, is actually now out of the card, leaving Kevin Croom without an opponent. So it's been a tumultuous 72 hours for Kevin Croom, losing opponents left and right. Not sure exactly what the Rand Weathers issue was, but, it's safe to assume that, maybe it was something medical or, I doubt it was a last-second injury, or else he wouldn't, I think, have actually said okay, and then 24 hours he's off the card. He's a pretty tough guy, and he holds, a decent amount of victories here in the local area. A lot of people actually like Rand. He's a crazy guy, so it'd be very interesting to see if Kevin Kroom ends up getting an opponent. You can't scramble like this at the very last second trying to find anyone. So, I mean, it should be very interesting. And I don't know, little known about Rand Weathers. He has a victory over Diego Brandao back in 2009.
Oh, wow. Huh. Interesting.
So, just some changes there. So, and more to come. These cards, I mean, unfortunately, just the nature of the business can change from, time to time. So, hopefully this is the last we hear of the updates, and hopefully this car stabilizes itself to be able to sell tickets.
Yeah, we all know about the injury bug that hit last year, so hopefully this is not a local problem. But also, Gracie Barra Gym had some breaking news they wanted to share with us. Rafael Freitas will be fighting in March on a Legacy Fighting Championships card, and Quinn Mulhern will make his UFC debut at UFC 158 against Rick Story. So let's get into the standing A count. The standing A count is the top 8 stories that we see are the top news that's making headlines in boxing and mixed martial arts. And I think I argue to say one of the number one stories has to be, it looks like there's a loophole in allowing amateur mixed martial arts in New York that might give UFC a chance to run shows in the Big Apple. Looks like they, as you know, Jorge, they had 2 kind of, ways of getting MMA legalized in New York. One was a lawsuit. The other one was going through the legal system. It was reported that Judge Kimba Wood and a representative of the state attorney's office agreed that the New York law banning mixed martial arts does not apply to amateur events. I don't really understand how this applies to the UFC since they're not an amateur organization, clearly. They pay their fighters. So, but nevertheless, if you pay attention on Twitter, I think it was yesterday or the day before, people were really excited at the chance of having mixed martial arts in New York. So it seems like this is going to become a reality. I think there's another hearing next week, and I think the legislative hearing is, I think it's the next month. So if that does happen, this not only opens the door for, Dana White's big-time 20th anniversary show in Madison Square Garden, but this opens up Brooklyn, Buffalo, Albany. I mean, it's really a huge market because it gets, casual media members to pay attention. So hopefully, that's all resolved. But, man, you have some news about Eric Morales. Looks like him and the WBC are going to team up to take on USADA.
Yep, USADA, otherwise known as the United States Anti-Doping Agency. As most of us know, Eric Morales did test positive for a substance that apparently he claims is not banned by boxing. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this actually goes. He's suspended for 2 years. I mean, the guy's past his prime. Maybe this is, just God's way of telling him just hang them up. But definitely him and the WBC are teaming up to actually challenge the United States Anti-Doping Agency over their positive drug test. So it'll be very interesting to see what angle he actually takes from this. So, I mean, despite the fact that clenbuterol is not a banned substance in boxing, he still tested positive for it, and it is something that, he was actually suspended for by the New York State Commission. So we'll see how this goes, and this will put an interesting twist on, just doping in sports, especially boxing, and I think MMA in a way also, man.
Yeah, no doubt. And really some other news that I think just rocked the Twitter sphere. The sport of wrestling, that's freestyle and Greco-Roman, has been taken out of the Olympic Games. Starting in 2020, unless something changes, there'll be no more wrestling. Wrestling will be able to apply for inclusion in the Olympics in 2020, but it'll be competing against these sports, man. Get a load of this. He'll be competing against, baseball, softball, karate, roller sports, wakeboarding, wushu. So the sport that pretty much was around, for hundreds of thousands of years now has a fight for its life. In its place will be the modern pentathlon. We'll be combining fencing, horse riding, swimming, running, and shooting. Very bizarre. From a quote from IOC spokesman, the International Olympic Community spokesman Mark Adams told the AP, "This is a process of renewing and reinventing the program for the Olympics. In the view of the executive board, this was the best program for the Olympic Games in 2020. It's not a case of what's wrong with wrestling. It's what's right with the 25 core sports." So pretty bizarre. I think insane would be the right word to use. At the same time, we'll get into it a little bit later, but what I've heard from a lot of people that follow this closely it seems like the sport of wrestling has to kind of blame itself. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But man, you have some news. You actually text me this about Ponce de Leon's opponent being pulled because of an injury.
Yeah, Jason Velez, who's one of the top prospects out of the country of Puerto Rico. The kid's 20-0 with 15 KOs. I had a chance to meet him out in Madison Square Garden for his fight against Salvador Sanchez III. Great kid, and the talent is just unreal. This guy has charisma. He has the looks, and he actually suffered a sprained ankle getting out of a pool, out of all things. So his fight March 2nd, WBC featherweight title, so his first title fight against Daniel Ponce de Leon is called off. This fight was scheduled to headline a Showtime televised card from the Apollo Theater. How awesome would that have been in Harlem, New York? So this was going, to actually put this kid on the map, and it's unfortunate that he actually got hurt. So another blow to boxing, especially now that we had Devin Alexander and Kell Brook, which I think is going to be one hell of a fight, canceled twice, and Jonathan Banks and Seth Mitchell, who were supposed to fight this weekend. That's a setback. So the injury bug that bit the UFC is over in boxing. So I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how the sport recovers after a really strong 2012.
Yeah, that's terrible. Hopefully it's just maybe a bad month, and guys will be careful about how to get out of a swimming pool, man. But nevertheless, it looks like the UFC is officially done with Cyborg Santos for now. During the Barral McDonald press conference during the media scrum, Dana White confirmed that they have released Cyborg Santos from the contract. If you watch Inside MMA on Access Television, Tito Ortiz was on there. Tito Ortiz is the manager for Cyborg, if you don't know. He stated that they asked for a release and the UFC granted her request. Basically, if you watch that media scrum of the Barral McDonald press conference, Dana White basically stated that Cyborg sent a letter from, I guess, her manager and her lawyer along with her doctor saying there's no way she can make 135 pounds. We had some technical difficulties, but it looks like we're back. The internet got you, man.
It did get me. I don't know what happened, man.
But I was just picking up, man, just with Cyborg, being released like this, it seems like, she thinks she has to leverage. I think it's going to come down to whether or not Ronda Rousey draws enough pay-per-view viewers to watch her fight. So if Ronda Rousey gets a good number, around 700,000, whether she wins or loses, I think the premise that Cyborg Santos is irrelevant could be true. However, if the Ronda Rousey number does lower than expected, then I think the UFC be more willing to work with Santos, knowing that they need a draw in order to get people to watch women's MMA. So I think it comes down to how many people watch the fight, not necessarily if Ronda wins or loses. So we'll see what happens there.
I completely agree with you, man. It's going to be very, I think with her, the UFC isn't going to try to put their chips in one bag. They're going to see how everything else plays out. And if I'm not mistaken, they signed about 6 women this week, right?
I think so, 6 to 10. I've heard that around that number.
Yeah, so I think the UFC will be all right. Even if, Cyborg's been out of the sport for quite some time, but if they're trying to build the super fight for the female division, then that would be it. I think Ronda Rousey can still dominate the headlines for them for at least a couple more fights, so another year before they actually even have to consider that Cyborg fight, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And speaking of fighting, or not fighting, I guess we should say, is Victor Ortiz. He's reportedly signed a contract to be on Dancing with the Stars. This guy's been all over the place lately with his fragrance and ointments. I don't know what this guy's actually doing. I guess he's just trying to hustle.
Don't forget about the Boys and Girls Club.
Oh, that's true. And you can't hate on the guy for, I guess, trying to put his name out there and trying to make money. So Victor Ortiz, we last saw him against Josecito Lopez with a broken jaw, and as we remember, he's probably most remembered for one, which he's interesting to me, just because of the fact what you remember him for are these 3 things: for what he's doing outside of the ring. This guy tried rapping. He had a very weird music video that I can send you, man. We'll post it on our page, man. Also, he's coming out with this line of cosmetics. And what else do you think of the headbutt that he had against Floyd Mayweather, and when he quit against Marcos Maidana? So he's got to get back in the ring, man. I don't know if Dancing with the Stars is going to win him any boxing fans.
Yeah, I don't know either, man. I think it's just a publicity stunt. I don't think you'll hurt him. I think you'll see because I think you've seen decent celebrities beyond there, especially football players, and it hasn't really affected them in terms of their credibility. So
Who the hell?
as long as
Who the hell is Emily Maynard?
I have no clue,
And
man. A lot of these people have no
Horny
idea who the heck.
Kardashian, Honey Boo Boo's mother. I didn't even find out who Honey Boo Boo was till just a couple of weeks ago, man. The kid creeps me out.
Circus. I agree with you. Um, in UFC news, looks like Alexander Gustafsson looks like he's going to get promised another title shot. It's been looks like we're back on some tech issues, so we're just going to go skip to the main event topics this week. Two big fights, a doubleheader of boxing and MMA action. We start with Adrian Broner taking on Gavin Rees from the UK. With this fight, can you give us a little bit of background on Gavin Rees? Is this a fight that, a lot of people are disrespecting Adrian Broner's opponent? Adrian Broner, is Will's favorite fighter. He talks him up big time, not only for his skill, but his personality outside the ring. So is this a fight that should boxing fans be excited for? Or is this, a stepping stone fight for Broner to get bigger paydays this year?
I think it's just a stepping stone. Reese is a decent fighter. I mean, 37-1. His only loss is to Andre Kotelnik, who hasn't fought in a couple of years, but I feel that he, fought well enough to actually beat Devin Alexander recently. Devin Alexander has received a couple of questionable victories over the past 3 years, and I think that was one of the last ones. Gavin Rees again, I mean, that's his only loss. It's Andrew Kotelnik, and there's no shame. But if you look at the record of a lot of the guys that Gavin Rees has fought, the kid doesn't have a padded record. I mean, he's fought guys who are 35-1 or 26-0, just incredible records. But again, a lot of these guys are just based out of Europe. This will be the first time that Rees will actually be fighting outside of Europe. This is the first time he's making the trip across the pond to the United States. Does he have the speed? Does he have the power to hang with Adrian Broner? No, he does not. I expect Rees to. I'd be surprised if he lasts more than 7 rounds. I think this fight's going to end early, and I think the odds reflect that. I mean, there's some casinos that have Adrian Broner as high as a 50-1 favorite. Man, it's just unreal. But you got to think about it. Odds for the underdog, I guess. So if you were to bet on Rees, he's only as high as an 18-1 underdog. So this is just a stepping stone for Adrian Broner. Who he'll fight next, I mean, who knows? Will he fight Miguel Vasquez, who has been very boring in the last few fights? Well, I guess if he wants to pick up another title, but someone like maybe, Richard Abril, if Abril gets past Sharif Bukhari in their next fight. But it's Adrian Broner is eventually going to have to move out of that division and move up to the light welterweight division. So it's going to be until then that we see what he's really made out of. Because let's not forget, the next weight class is loaded. Danny Garcia, Lucas Matriz, Brandon Rios. All these guys are still young, man. So if he moves up, that's when we're going to see what Adrian Broner is made out of and see if he is indeed the future of boxing. But the skill set is there. I mean, you've seen Adrian Broner fight before. The defense, the speed, the power, he has it all. And, he has, as much as Will might hate it, he has the charisma.
He does. And then that means that the paychecks are weighed if he's willing to make the move up there. Let's talk about this UFC on Fuel card real quickly. Renan Barão, Michael McDonald for the interim bantamweight title, the first title fight on Fuel TV ever. Also features Dustin Poirier taking on Jackson's own Cub Swanson. Really, this card is pretty loaded with big fights. So I want to focus on the co-main event and main event. Really, the Cub Swanson and Dustin Poirier, both these guys really are really high in the featherweight division. But with Anthony Pettis getting the next title shot, really for both these guys, I mean, I don't see them earning a title opportunity with a win here. Do you?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think they're going to have to wait a little bit longer, and I know how desperately Cub Swanson wants that rematch against Jose Aldo, man. It's, he's been on that guy's career highlight reel for quite some time since they first fought in the WEC, and he wants that fight back just because he didn't feel like he got to, display his skills. But I don't think so. I mean, Dustin Poirier, he's just coming off of, I know he's coming off of a recent victory, but let's not forget, he did lose by submission to Chang Sung Jung. It's not like this guy's going to pull off 2 wins in a row and then get a title shot. A victory over Cub Swanson will be huge just because of how hot Cub Swanson actually is right now, coming off 3, highlight reel victories in his last 2 fights. Especially, he had 2 good contests against Ross Pearson and George Roop. Charles Oliveira, he easily handled in his last contest. So if either one of them would get the title shot, I think it would be Cub Swanson, but I think he's going to have to wait another fight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a great matchup. And really, I think for both these guys, since they're so exciting anyway, I think they'll get Dana White's attention whether they win or lose. The main event featuring Michael McDonald, Renan Barão. I like this fight a lot, but not on Field TV. I mean, this fight is from England, so it's going to be around like noon, 1 o'clock when this card's going to be on Field TV. I know they air it twice, one live and then one, on tape delay at nighttime. But in terms of Renan Barão's exposure, he's had 2 impressive, title defenses. Looking at his record here, he won the title against, Uriah Faber. He's defending it for the first time against Michael McDonald. You take a look at his last 2 fights, Jorgensen and Faber, both unanimous decisions. While impressive, not, the most thrilling. Do you see Renan Barão being more exciting here against a very game Michael McDonald? He's very dangerous. Really has been on a tear in the featherweight division. In the bantamweight division, excuse me. Do you see this fight being compelling enough to pick an upset, or do you think Barão's just technical ability will be too much?
I think the technical ability may be too much, but Michael McDonald's going to bring it, man. I don't think he's going to let Barão actually walk all over him. Let's not forget this. Michael McDonald's a guy who has actually put, I think 8 fights in a row win streak, and he's going against Barão, who hasn't lost since the first fight of his career. But the competition that McDonald has faced, I wouldn't say it's world class. He's had a lot of good contests, a lot of close contests. A fight against who was it? Was it Edwin Figueroa? Or afterward, there was a split decision in there. I remember where
I'm looking. It's Chris Carriazo.
Okay, so that contest, it was a pretty close one. But he went on to dominate Alex Soto. And the next fight, it was against Miguel Torres. It's been a while. It's been almost a year since that fight. So will the inactivity actually hurt Michael McDonald? But I think if he keeps it standing, that's where he has his chance. He's going to have to use his kickboxing to be able to actually pull off the victory here. And, both guys are, they're relatively young. Barão's 25, Michael McDonald's 22. Michael McDonald, if he loses this, he's in good stance based off of age to be able to get another title shot within the next 2 years. So
I agree with you. And he's coming off an injury to his finger. I think UFC Tonight broke it down where a tendon, you best describe it, came off of his finger, so it exposed his knuckle. So I think they had a doctor kind of go into this, in detail on how he had surgery to fix that. It's just insane. I couldn't imagine punching with that over and over again.
Are you going with the upset on that, or are you going Barão?
I like hitting Barão a lot. I was kind of on this guy's bandwagon when he was first, in the WEC, and then made his transition to the UFC. I just think he's a lighter version of Jose Aldo. I don't really see an upset here, but I do see Michael McDonald being very impressive, and really, I could see kind of what we saw with Rory McDonald and Carlos Condit, where it's really close, but you could see the veteran pull away late. So just real quickly, man, let's get into some of these topics, especially with wrestling being taken out of the Olympics. This was a huge topic. This was all over Twitter. People were outraged. And I want to kind of apply this to the boxing angle of things, because from what you and Will and all of us have been talking about, there have been huge problems with USA boxing. During the Olympic Games, there's fighters getting robbed of decisions. And because of that, I think there's been a lot of controversy surrounding and a lot of bad publicity surrounding international boxing competition in the Olympic Games. So, with the wrestling being taken out, from what I understand, this is more of a logistical thing from people that follow the sport. There wasn't really anything, wrong with it in depth. It seems like boxing has more problems with it. So saying that, do you think boxing could be next on the chopping block? If wrestling was around for hundreds of years and has a huge tradition, why not boxing? Boxing's on the ropes, and honestly, in terms of producing professional prospects, besides Andre Ward, I think lately we haven't seen, a successful transition between a amateur in the Olympics winning the gold medal and a professional fighter. Am I wrong there? Is there a reason to be concerned in boxing in the Olympic Games?
I think just a little bit, but here's the thing about boxing. There's a lot of money involved, whether it's legal or illegal. I mean, there are a lot of judges that are being paid under the table. I'm sure that a lot of, those people on the board for the IOC are getting paid also for a lot of these decisions that are coming out of, especially what it seems like for the majority Eastern Europe. And around areas of the Middle East as well. So when it comes to boxing, I think, it sounds bad to say, but just because of the corruption that exists in amateur boxing, with a lot of these judges, supposedly being paid off, I think that's what it might be holding it in there. And here's the thing about the two sports. I mean, wrestling, after the Olympics, or as high as you can get as an amateur, where else is there to go? I mean, a lot of these guys are going to MMA. And then you think about the other sports as well. I mean, speed walking, man, I mean, come on. Some of these other Olympic sports that actually exist, you think, why wrestling? And here's the thing, when you compare wrestling and boxing, the scoring doesn't make sense. So if someone gets paid off, they can just interpret it as, this is how I scored it. There's no real technical rules when it comes to scoring in amateur boxing as there is in wrestling. Wrestling, it's 100 times more clear when an athlete actually scores. So, to be honest, man, I think it may be due to the corruption that exists within boxing that people shouldn't be, concerned of it being cut. And wrestling, I mean, maybe that just really doesn't exist there, and the IOC was just like, all right, we're going to cut this sport. We're not making our money under the table. These are just my assumptions. I mean, I have no proof to this, but sure. I mean, it just makes, it makes no sense for them to cut it. And it's just a shame that, the Olympics aren't coming to the United States anytime soon, or who knows, hopefully, I mean, if it does come back, we bring it back. But as far as I know, or as far as the information that I have, it's going to be in Brazil, right? In 2016 wrestling, it's cut from the London Olympics.
Yes, it's cut from the 2020 Olympics. And I just want to add too that there are some scoring changes to boxing, right? No headgear, changes to the scoring system. Will that apply for the entire sport? And in future Olympic Games, or is that just preliminary competition to qualify?
It sounds like they're going to ease their way into the Olympics because they're going to do a 10-point must system, which I like, just because of the fact you don't have judges making up or seeing these punches that actually didn't land. So a 10-point must system is good, I think. Also, when it comes to the no headgear, these are going to be for older elite athletes. I'm not sure how good I feel about guys who aren't getting paid fighting without headgear. It's going to be very interesting how when these rules actually go into effect, how these individuals actually take to them. If we'll see, an uproar about bringing the headgear back. But either way, I don't think you should be putting your life out there and risking your life if you're not getting paid. If you're an amateur and no headgear, I'm against that.
Mm-hmm. Just with wrestling, if you watch Luke Thomas's Google Plus chats on MMAfighting.com, he went into detail on how, with FILA and with the international, wrestling community, how it's tied into Olympic funding specifically. How pretty much the Pan Am Games and the World Championships all come through Olympic funding. So when you cut that off, there's really, if you're a wrestler in college, that's basically, you can't, the wrestling, the World Championships, the Pan Am Games, other international competitions are basically funded through Olympic competition. A lot of these wrestlers go train in the international wrestling facilities in their home countries. A lot of the wrestlers go and train in Colorado. I'm sure that other international countries, they have the Ministry of Sport where they get funding specifically through the government to train. So without the Olympics, there's no point. So I think it's very unfortunate. I think in terms of affecting the mixed martial arts community, I think you could see it be a positive in a way, because you'll see a lot more, All-Americans, actually try the sport. I think the negative is, I think it'll be more out of necessity rather than the urge to be a competitor and the love of MMA. Because I think, wrestling is wrestling. You're not getting punched or elbowed or kicked or choked, It's kind of two completely different things. So hopefully it seems like, everybody from, mixed martial artists to even the professional wrestling community is kind of rallying behind getting, wrestling back in the Olympics. So we'll see what happens.
I have a question for you. We're 3 years away from what is possibly the final, the final, I guess, attempt here, or the final show for wrestling, if you will, at least for a few certain amount of years. So within the next, let's say we're 3 years from this Olympics, we're another 4 from that, so we're 7 from there. Are we going to see a crazy rise in MMA participants within the next 10 years because these guys have no other outlet?
Yeah, I think it's tough to say. I think the last year I kind of noticed a lot of MMA gyms scouting collegiate wrestlers was during the NCAA championships. I think you saw a lot of interest from gyms scouting talent. But the thing with mixed martial arts is just so much to learn. I mean, you're learning, kind of, jiu-jitsu and striking, and it's a very slow process. I mean, you really have to you're starting from scratch all over again. And by the time a lot of these guys are out of college, they're in their early 20s. So, I think because there's more money and there's more opportunities with Bellator, especially with the nature of MMA compared to boxing, where you need 20 professional fights to really make a decent living. With MMA, if you win 4 impressive fights in a row at a higher weight class, you can get yourself into a pretty good spot. So I think you'll see. I think you're right. I think you'll see an increase, but I don't know in terms of actual talent how they'll be. I don't know if they'll be that successful at the high level of the UFC. I just as we've seen many a times, just because you're All-American wrestler, it doesn't mean how you're going to be dominating everybody. Our last topic is testosterone replacement therapy, something we've talked about lots of times. I know, Jorge, you want to chime in on this. Just with, Vitor Belfort getting an exemption because of, during his win over Michael Bisping, Vitor Belfort did test positive for testosterone before in Las Vegas, and now he gets an exemption to the UFC. A lot of fighters are trying this out. As long as you have a decent excuse, you can get this exemption, even if you test positive for steroids. As long as you have a decent reason, as long as it's not related to steroids, you can still get one of these. So, what are your thoughts on this, man? Is this really cheating? And does this highlight, just kind of the lack of, I guess, a unified administration and, watching over the entire sport?
I think so. It's just very interesting just because you think of – I kind of compare Vitor Belfort to, let's say, I mean, he's not on the level of greatness such as like a Kobe Bryant. What's every time someone brings up Kobe Bryant's age? Yeah, he's 34, but what do people say? He's an old 34 just because of how long he's been doing this. Vitor Belfort, the same. The guy's been fighting for what seems to be forever, and he's only 35 years old. But how much, of this does definitely benefit? I mean, it's not natural. I mean, for you to actually input this into your body. So with Belfort, he's one of my favorite fighters of all time. But how much advantage because of this does he hold over a lot of these guys? And you think of Michael Bisping, he did lose. Who knows if Vitor Belfort wasn't receiving this, how the fight would have gone? And Bisping's last loss, that was to Chael Sonnen, another guy who tested positive for what is a banned substance. So you just wonder how much this actually helps this guy Vitor Belfort, especially now that he's at 35 years old, and he's an old 35, as I mentioned about Kobe Bryant being an older fighter. So, I mean, I just don't know how fair this is to a lot of these guys. I'm great to see that Belfort continues to to thrive even in his later years, but I mean, where do you draw the line between fair and not?
Yeah, I think it's an overall sports problem, and I think whenever you hear the government and sports get involved, taxpayers who are just casual fans usually say, "Why are you wasting your time with a sport?" Well, I think you have to think of it as a sport as more as a business as the enterprise. I mean, you have the government investigating businesses all the time for improper business practices. This is the same thing. I mean, and this is in case people are putting their lives in risk, taking these illegal substances. So I think with TRT, there's a lot of, poor research being put out there. I even heard an interview, I think it was either NBA or NFL, since 1993, they've only handed out, maybe under 10 TRT exemptions since they've implemented the process. Wow. And now you see MMA, it's, every guy wants a TRT exemption. So I just think, there needs to be, that's why I say there needs to be an overall commission. That's the only way to get this solved. I mean, people are like, oh, that'll never happen, so we shouldn't focus on it. But that's the only way you're going to solve these problems of performance-enhancing drugs, bad judging, bad reffing. You need an overall commission to handle all this. I mean, you can't allow the UFC to drug tests. I mean, that's the thing. That's what it comes down to. Everybody's like, oh, the UFC should drug test. Should we really trust a promoter of fighting to be honest with drug testing? I mean, it's insane. I mean, people are like, oh, Dana White should take the high road and drug test their athletes. So you'll believe every word that comes out of his mouth. Exactly. Or Bjorn Rebney and Bellator. I mean, take a look at Major League Baseball. You can't believe them. I mean, it's insane. I just think, trusting a promoter and drug testing their own athletes, you're asking for trouble. And I just think, this Vitor Belfort situation is another example in that. So, I don't know. I just, the UFC, drug testing their athletes, I guess is a positive. At the same time, George St. Pierre tests positive against, let's say he's fighting Anderson Silva. Do I really believe Dana White's going to, take off that fight? Do you? I don't think so, right? That fight's going on. It's going to sweep that test under the rug, and then he'll handle it afterwards. I mean, it's insane to trust a promoter, whether it's Dana White, Bjorn Rebney, or anybody. It's not to cast aspersions on them, but you can't put that trust in those promoters. You can't,
and I just wonder how 10, 15 years from now we're going to look at this kind of stuff, man, and see what type of advances we have, and then just think, that was completely unfair.
Well, yeah, I just think there's no funding as the people that follow the sport to have more resources to interview the athletic commissions. That they said these commissions don't have the money to do it. They're underfunded, they're undereducated, and they just can't pull it off. Especially now in New York, if this third party commission or whatever they get sanctioned there. I mean, what happens there? The UFC is going to drug test, and then everybody's going to think, oh, the UFC is the good guy. They test all their athletes. When John Jones has a major fight in Madison Square Garden against Anderson Silva. If Anderson Silva gets popped for steroids or John Jones gets popped, there's no way I believe Dana White would ever, pull that fight away because somebody failed a pre-fight drug test ever. If that happens, then I'll think Dana White's the greatest guy who ever lived. But until then, I just can't believe it. I think that's going to wrap up our show. Pretty short edition this week, man. But next week, I think, we're 1 week away. Once we do the show next week from the Bellator card, that week will be Ronda Rousey versus Liz Carmouche. Please check out the first 2 episodes of the UFC Primetime. Really compelling television. We'll get all in that women's MMA next week. Do you have anything else to add, Jorge, before we say goodbye?
That's it, man. Interested in seeing how soon Adrian Broner gets a knockout this weekend.
Totally. Over or under 6 rounds? I got to go with the under.
Way under, man. If I had to guess, I'm going to say 3rd round.
Cool, man. Well, you can get in touch with the show through lowblow505@gmail.com. Also through YouTube, through youtube.com/lowblow505. Through Twitter, through @thelowblow. Through Facebook, through facebook.com/lowblowpodcast. Also, we're available through the iTunes, program, and Stitcher radio and mobile app. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties this week. Hopefully, Skype will be kinder to us next week. So for Jorge Hernandez, I'm Justin Goodrum, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.
This has been The Low Blow on SouthwestFight.com, USCombatSports.com, and Fight Fans Radio.